Sometimes the hardest lessons come wrapped in the warmest smiles. They say trust is earned, but I learned the hard way that trust can also be stolen piece by piece, until you're left wondering if anything was ever real at all. This is my story. This is what happens when you believe in someone so completely that you forget to believe in yourself. If you like stories about real-life experiences and hard-won lessons, please subscribe to our channel and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Your support means everything. My name is Patrick, and back in early 2015 I was 46 years old, working as an operations manager for a logistics company in Seattle. I'd been divorced for about 8 years by then, no kids, and honestly I was just going through the motions. Work, gym, occasional drinks with colleagues, repeat. Life felt like it was on autopilot and I was the passenger, but I had a plan. I'd been saving aggressively for years because I had this dream of retiring early, maybe by 52 or 53, and moving somewhere warm, somewhere affordable, somewhere I could actually live instead of just exist. I'd done my research, crunched the numbers about 100 times, and I kept coming back to the Philippines. The cost of living was low, the people seemed friendly from what I'd read online, and the weather was exactly what my rain-soaked Seattle soul needed. In March of 2015, I finally pulled the trigger and booked my first trip to the Philippines. 2.5 weeks in Manila, Palawan, and Cebu. I wasn't looking for anything except a change of scenery and a break from the gray skies. I certainly wasn't looking for romance. After my divorce, I'd pretty much sworn off serious relationships. My ex-wife had taught me that love could turn cold faster than Seattle coffee left on the counter, and I wasn't eager to repeat that lesson. But you know what they say about the best-laid plans. I arrived in Manila on a Thursday evening, and the heat hit me like a wall the moment I stepped off the plane. It was intense, humid, the kind of heat that makes your shirt stick to your back within minutes, but I loved it. After clearing customs and grabbing my bags, I took a taxi to my hotel in Makati. The city was alive in a way Seattle never was. Traffic was chaotic, horns honking constantly, jeepneys weaving through lanes like they were playing a video game, street vendors everywhere, the smell of grilled meat and tropical fruit mixing with exhaust fumes. It was overwhelming and exhilarating at the same time. I spent the first few days just exploring Manila. Visited Intramuros, walked around Rizal Park, tried every street food I could find. The food was incredible. Adobo sinigang lechon. I was in heaven. But it was also lonely. I'm not great at making friends on the fly, and wandering around a foreign city by yourself can make you feel pretty isolated, even when you're surrounded by millions of people. Still, I was enjoying myself. This was exactly what I needed, a reset. On day 4, I flew to Palawan, El Nido specifically. If you've never been, it's basically paradise. Crystal clear water, limestone cliffs, hidden lagoons. I booked a few island-hopping tours, and that's when I started talking to other travelers. There was this group of backpackers, mostly Europeans, and they were friendly enough, but I didn't really click with them. They were young, early 20s, and their idea of a good time involved getting drunk on cheap rum every night. Not really my scene anymore, but it was nice to have some human interaction. After a week in Palawan, I headed to Cebu. I'd heard great things about it, how it had a good mix of city life and beach access. My hotel was in Cebu City, and I planned to spend a few days there before heading to some of the nearby islands. That's where everything changed. That's where I met her. It was my 3rd day in Cebu City. I'd spent the morning visiting Magellan's Cross and the Basilica del Santo Niño, typical tourist stuff. By early afternoon, I was hungry and tired, so I ducked into this small Filipino restaurant near the waterfront. It wasn't fancy, just a local spot with plastic chairs and ceiling fans that barely moved the hot air around. I ordered some pork barbecue and rice, and while I was waiting, I noticed her. She was sitting at a table near the window, alone, scrolling through her phone. She had this quiet beauty, you know? Not flashy or dramatic. She was wearing a simple white blouse and jeans, her long black hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked like she was in her late 20s, maybe 30. What struck me most was how calm she seemed. Everyone else in the restaurant was chatting or on their phones, but she just looked peaceful, like she was perfectly comfortable being by herself. Our eyes met for a second and she smiled. Just a small, polite smile. I smiled back and looked away because I didn't want to be that creepy foreign guy staring at women. But a few minutes later, the waiter brought my food and he also brought her order to the wrong table. There was this brief moment of confusion and she laughed. Not a fake laugh, but a genuine musical kind of laugh that made me smile despite myself. The waiter apologized, sorted out the orders, and that was that. Except it wasn't, because she looked over at me again and said, "The service here is usually better, I promise." Her English was perfect, barely an accent. I chuckled and said something like, "No worries, the food smells amazing, so I'm willing to forgive them." And just like that, we started talking. She introduced herself as Marisel, or Mari for short. She was from Cebu originally, worked as a bookkeeper for a small export company, and lived with her aunt in the city. She asked where I was from, what brought me to the Philippines, the usual questions. And I told her, Seattle, first time in the country, planning to retire here someday. She seemed genuinely interested, asked follow-up questions, and before I knew it, we'd been talking for over an hour. Our food had long gone cold, but neither of us seemed to care. She told me she'd been having a rough week. Her boss was demanding. Her aunt had been sick and she just needed to get out of the office for lunch and clear her head. I told her I understood completely, that sometimes you just need a break from your own life. She laughed at that, said it was a good way to put it. When we finally left the restaurant, I asked if she'd like to grab coffee sometime. She hesitated for just a second, and I immediately regretted asking. But then she said yes, exchanged numbers with me, and we agreed to meet the next day. That night, lying in my hotel bed, I couldn't stop thinking about her. It wasn't just physical attraction, though she was beautiful. It was the way she carried herself, the way she listened when I talked, the way she seemed genuinely interested in me as a person. I hadn't felt that in years, maybe not since the early days with my ex-wife, back when we still liked each other. The next day we met at a coffee shop in Ayala Center. We talked for hours again. She told me about growing up in Cebu, how her parents had passed away when she was young, and her aunt had raised her and her two younger siblings. She'd put herself through college while working part-time, graduated with honors, and now she was trying to help her siblings finish school. She was only 28, but she'd already lived more life than most people twice her age. I found myself opening up to her too, telling her about my divorce, my loneliness, my dreams of starting over somewhere new. She listened without judgment, and when I was done, she just said, "I think you're very brave for wanting to change your life." No one had ever called me brave before. Impulsive, maybe, foolish, definitely, but brave, that meant something. We spent the rest of my time in Cebu together. She took me to places tourists don't usually go. Small local markets, a hidden waterfall. About an hour outside the city, her favorite bakery that made these incredible ensaimadas. We talked about everything. Books, movies, politics, religion, family. And somewhere in those conversations I fell for her. Not the crazy head-over-heels kind of falling. It was quieter than that. More certain. Like I'd found something I didn't even know I was looking for. On my last night in Cebu, we had dinner at a restaurant overlooking the ocean. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and I remember thinking this was one of those perfect moments you read about but never actually experience. Mary looked at me across the table and said, "I'm going to miss you when you leave." Her eyes were sad, and I realized I was going to miss her too, desperately. I told her I didn't want this to end, that maybe we could try to make it work long distance. She smiled, but it was a bittersweet smile. She said, "Patrick, you live on the other side of the world. How would that even work?" I didn't have a good answer, but I told her I'd figure it out. I'd call, we'd video chat, I'd come back to visit. She studied my face for a long moment, like she was trying to decide if I was serious, and then she nodded. "Okay," she said softly. "Let's try." Flying back to Seattle was one of the hardest things I'd done in years. I felt like I was leaving a piece of myself behind. But Mari and I stayed in touch. We talked almost every day, sometimes for hours. The time difference was brutal. When I was waking up, she was going to bed. But we made it work. We'd video chat on weekends, send each other photos, share little details about our days. She told me about her work, her siblings, her aunt's health struggles. I told her about my boring job, my co-workers, my growing impatience with Seattle's endless drizzle. About 2 months after I got back, Mari started mentioning money problems. Her aunt needed medication for diabetes, and it was expensive. Her younger brother's tuition was due, and they were short. She never asked me directly for help, but I could read between the lines. She was stressed, worried, trying to hold everything together on her modest salary. So I offered. I sent her $500 to help with her aunt's medication. She was so grateful, almost embarrassed. She promised to pay me back, but I told her not to worry about it. I had the money. She needed it. And we were together now, even if we were thousands of miles apart. That's what you do for someone you care about. Over the next 6 months, I sent money a few more times. Never huge amounts, 300 here, 400 there. Her aunt needed more medication, her sister needed books for school, their roof was leaking and needed repairs. Each time, Mari would thank me profusely, promise to pay me back someday, and I'd tell her the same thing. Don't worry about it. I was making good money, saving aggressively for my retirement, and helping her out didn't hurt my plans. Besides, I was planning to go back to the Philippines in early 2016, and I'd get to see her again. That was worth any amount of money. When I finally returned to Cebu in February 2016, it was like no time had passed at all. Mari met me at the airport, and when I saw her waiting for me in the arrivals area, everything else just faded away. We hugged, and she felt so real and solid after months of only seeing her through a screen. I'd booked an Airbnb apartment for 3 weeks, and Mari took time off work to spend it with me. Those 3 weeks were some of the happiest of my life. We explored Cebu together, visited her family. Her aunt and siblings were warm and welcoming, and we talked seriously about our future. I told her I was planning to retire in about 4 years, and I wanted to move to the Philippines, to Cebu specifically, to be with her. She cried when I said that. Happy tears. She said she couldn't believe someone like me would give up their life in America for her. But I told her the truth. I wasn't giving up anything. I was gaining everything. Before I left, I asked her to marry me. I didn't have a ring. I wanted her to pick one out herself. But I got down on one knee in her aunt's living room, surrounded by her family, and asked if she'd be my wife. She said yes immediately, crying again, and her aunt and siblings clapped and cheered. It was one of the best moments of my entire life. The plan was simple. I'd go back to Seattle, work for another 4 years, save as much as I could, and then retire to the Philippines in 2020. We'd get married as soon as I moved, and we'd build a life together. In the meantime, I'd continue sending money to help her family, and we'd stay connected through calls and chats. It was a good plan, a solid plan. I believed in it completely. I returned to Seattle and threw myself into work. I picked up overtime. Whenever I could, cut my expenses even more, and watched my retirement fund grow. Mari and I talked every single day without fail. She'd tell me about her day, I'd tell her about mine, and we'd count down the days until I could quit my job and move. The money I sent her increased gradually. Her aunt's medical needs seemed to get more complex. First it was diabetes medication, then it was doctor's visits, then it was a brief hospitalization. Mari would send me photos of medical bills, receipts from pharmacies, and I'd wire money to help cover it. By the end of 2016, I'd probably sent around $8,000 total. It was adding up, but I told myself it was an investment in our future. This was going to be my family, and you take care of family. In 2017, her brother got into a car accident. Nothing too serious, but he needed some medical treatment, and the family couldn't afford it. I sent $1,500. A few months later, her sister needed emergency dental work. I sent another $1,000. By the end of 2017, I'd sent close to $15,000 total. I started keeping a spreadsheet to track it, not because I didn't trust Mari, but because I wanted to make sure I was still on track for retirement. The numbers were getting bigger, but I was still okay. Still saving, still on target. In 2018, things escalated. Mari's aunt had a stroke and needed to be hospitalized for 2 weeks. The bills were enormous by Filipino standards. Mari was distraught, calling me in tears, saying she didn't know what to do. I sent $5,000 to cover the hospital stay. Then her aunt needed ongoing therapy, medication, special equipment. I sent another $3,000, then $2,000 more. By the end of 2018, I'd sent over $30,000. That was starting to hurt. That was money I'd planned to use to buy property in the Philippines, to fund my first few years of retirement. But what was I supposed to do? Let her aunt suffer? Let Mari drown in debt? I loved this woman. I was going to spend the rest of my life with her. So I kept sending money. The calls and video chats continued, but I started noticing small changes. Marries seemed more distracted sometimes, like her mind was somewhere else. She'd mention people I didn't know, friends she was spending time with, and when I'd ask about them, she'd change the subject. I told myself I was being paranoid. Long-distance relationships are hard, and stress can make people act differently. Her aunt was sick, her family was struggling, and I was on the other side of the world. Of course she'd be distracted. In early 2019, I quit my job. I'd hit my target just barely. I had enough saved up to generate about $2,800 a month in retirement income, plus a chunk of cash for emergencies and getting set up in the Philippines. It wasn't as much as I'd originally planned. Those medical bills had eaten into my savings, but it was enough. I'd done it. I was retiring at 50, just like I'd planned, and I was moving to Cebu to marry the woman I loved. I flew out in April 2019, all my belongings packed into 2 large suitcases and a carry-on. Everything else I'd sold or given away. I was burning the boats, as they say. There was no going back. Marries met me at the airport again and we hugged, but something felt different. She seemed nervous, fidgety. I asked if she was okay, and she said she was just overwhelmed with emotion, excited but scared. I understood that. This was a big change for both of us. We got married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the Cebu City Hall. Her family was there, a few of her friends, and that was it. I didn't have anyone to invite. My family back in the States and I weren't close, and I'd lost touch with most of my friends over the years. But it was fine. This was about Marries and me, starting our new life together. After the ceremony, we moved into a small apartment I'd rented in Mandaue City, just outside Cebu. It was modest, but it was ours. Or at least I thought it was ours. The first few months of married life were good, but there were cracks. Small things that didn't quite add up. Marries was on her phone a lot, more than before. She'd get texts at odd hours and would glance at them, then put her phone face down on the table without saying who it was. When I asked, she'd say it was just her sister or a co-worker. I didn't push. I didn't want to be that suspicious, jealous husband. I wanted to trust her. She'd also go out in the evenings sometimes, saying she was visiting her aunt or meeting a friend, and she'd be gone for hours. Again, I told myself this was normal. She had a life here before I arrived, and I couldn't expect her to drop everything just because I'd moved. But then the money requests got worse. Her aunt needed another procedure, $4,000, then $6,000 for follow-up care. Then her brother needed money for a business opportunity that fell through. $3,000. Her sister's tuition increased unexpectedly. $2,000. By the end of 2019, I'd sent or given Marries another $25,000, beyond what I'd already sent. I was now down to about $60,000 in savings, and my monthly income was barely covering our expenses. I was starting to panic. At this rate, I wouldn't last more than a few years before I'd have to go back to work. But what was I supposed to do? These were emergencies. Real emergencies. At least that's what Marries told me. In early 2020, COVID hit and the world shut down. Cebu went into strict lockdown, and Marries and I were stuck in our apartment for months. At first, it was kind of nice. We'd cook together, watch movies, talk about our future. But as the weeks dragged on, the cracks widened. She was on her phone constantly, texting someone, laughing at messages I couldn't see. When I'd ask who she was talking to, she'd snap at me, say I was being controlling, that she needed to have her own life. I apologized, said I didn't mean to pry, and tried to give her space. But it gnawed at me. Something was wrong. I could feel it. In June 2020, Marries told me her aunt needed surgery. A serious surgery. It would cost $12,000. I didn't have $12,000. I barely had $60,000 left, and that was supposed to last me the rest of my life. I told Marries I couldn't afford it, and she broke down, sobbing, saying her aunt would die without the surgery, asking how I could be so heartless. I felt like the worst person in the world. So I emptied one of my retirement accounts early, took the tax hit and gave her the money. $12,000 gone in an instant. She hugged me, thanked me, said I'd saved her aunt's life. I wanted to believe her. I desperately wanted to believe her. But after that, things got even worse. Marries became cold, distant. She'd barely talk to me, spent most of her time in the bedroom on her phone or laptop. We stopped having meaningful conversations. We stopped being a couple. We were just two people living in the same apartment, coexisting. I tried to talk to her about it, asked if something was wrong, if I'd done something to upset her. She'd just say she was stressed, that the pandemic was hard on everyone, that I was overreacting. But I knew better. I knew something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. In August 2020, I made a decision. I needed to know the truth. I needed to see those medical bills for myself, verify that the money I'd been sending was actually going where Marries said it was. So one day, when Marries went out to buy groceries, I searched the apartment. I felt terrible doing it, like I was violating her privacy, but I had to know. I looked through drawers, closets, her laptop, and that's when I found it. A folder on her laptop labeled bills in English. I opened it and my stomach dropped. The medical bills were fake. All of them. They were poorly photoshopped documents, with made-up hospital names and incorrect formats. I pulled up Google, searched for the hospitals listed on the bills, and none of them existed. Some of the bills had logos from real hospitals, but the details were all wrong. I felt like I was going to be sick. I kept digging, and that's when I found the chat logs. Messages between Marries and someone named Carlo. The messages went back years, all the way to before I'd even met Marries. They were together. They'd been together the whole time. And the kicker? The messages showed that Carlo had been coaching Marries on how to get money out of me. He'd even helped her create the fake medical bills. They joked about how gullible I was, how easy it was to manipulate me. Marries called me her retirement plan, her ATM. Carlo called me worse things, things I don't even want to repeat. I sat there in front of her laptop, reading message after message, and I felt everything crumble. Our entire relationship was a lie. Every I love you, every promise, every moment we'd shared, it was all fake. She'd never loved me. She'd seen me as a mark, a target, a way to fund her real life with Carlo. I'd given her over $70,000 over the course of 5 years, and it had all gone to him. To them. To their life together while I played the fool. When Marries came home, I confronted her. I showed her the laptop, the messages, the fake bills. She didn't even try to deny it. She just stood there staring at me with this blank expression, like she'd been caught cheating on a test, and knew there was no point arguing. I asked her why. Why go through all this? Why marry me? She just shrugged and said, "Because you made it easy." That was it. No apology, no explanation. Just cold, brutal honesty. I asked if she ever cared about me at all, and she paused, then said, "In the beginning, maybe a little. But then Carlo came back into my life and everything changed." Carlo, it turned out, was her boyfriend from college. They'd broken up when he moved to Manila for work, but they'd reconnected about a year before I met her. The whole relationship with me, the whole marriage, it was all a scam to fund their life together. Carlo had debt, big debt, and they'd decided I was the solution. I told her I was leaving. I'd file for annulment, get as far away from her as possible, and try to rebuild my life. She didn't fight me. She just said, "Okay." No drama, no begging, no tears. It was like I meant nothing to her. And I guess I didn't. I was just a bank account with legs. I moved out that week, found a cheap studio apartment in Cebu City, and started the annulment process. It's not easy in the Philippines, not quick and not cheap. It took over a year and cost me another $5,000 in legal fees. But I got it done. The marriage was annulled in late 2021, and I was free. Free but broken, and nearly broke. I had about $30,000 left to my name, and my monthly income was barely covering rent and food. The life I'd dreamed of, the retirement I'd worked so hard for, it was all gone, stolen by someone I'd trusted completely. I stayed in Cebu for a while, but every street, every restaurant, every beach reminded me of her, of what I'd lost. So in early 2022, I moved to Dumaguete, smaller city, quieter, fewer memories. I rented a tiny apartment, got a part-time job teaching English online to make ends meet, and tried to figure out how to live with what I had left. It's been 3 years now, and I'm still here, still in the Philippines, because despite everything, I do love this country. It wasn't the Philippines that betrayed me. It was one person. One very convincing, very calculating person. I've learned a lot since then. I've learned that trust isn't something you give freely. It's something you build slowly, carefully, with evidence and time. I've learned that love can be faked, and that some people are very, very good at faking it. I've learned that desperation and loneliness can make you ignore red flags the size of billboards. And I've learned that no matter how badly someone hurts you, you still have to find a way to move forward, because the alternative is staying stuck in the past forever. Do I regret coming to the Philippines? No, this is still where I want to be, even if it looks different than I imagined. Do I regret meeting Marries? That's harder to answer. Part of me wishes I'd never walked into that restaurant, never smiled at her, never fallen for her lies. But another part of me thinks maybe I needed this lesson. Maybe I needed to learn that I can't outsource my happiness to someone else, that I can't buy love or loyalty, and that sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones we'd never suspect. I'm 55 now, so I still dream of a comfortable retirement, but it's going to take longer than I thought. I'll probably have to work until I'm 60, maybe 65, to rebuild what I lost. But I'll get there. I have to believe that, because the alternative is giving up, and I'm not ready to do that. If you're watching this and you're thinking about retiring abroad, or marrying someone you met overseas, or sending money to help someone in need, please be careful. Ask questions. Verify things. Don't take anything at face value. I'm not saying everyone is a scammer, because they're not. Most people are good, honest, and genuine. But some aren't. And you won't know which is which until it's too late. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. Don't ignore the red flags like I did. Don't convince yourself that love will conquer all, because sometimes love isn't even real. I don't know what the future holds for me. Maybe I'll meet someone genuine someday, someone who actually cares about me and not just my bank account. Or maybe I'll stay single, focus on rebuilding my life, and find peace in my own company. Either way, I'll be okay. I survived this, and I'll survive whatever comes next. That's the one thing Marries couldn't take from me, my resilience, my ability to get back up after being knocked down. She took my money, my trust, my dreams, but she didn't take my spirit. That's still mine, so here I am, 55 years old, living in a small apartment in Dumaguete, teaching English to students on the other side of the world, trying to make enough to cover rent and food, and maybe save a little for the future. It's not the retirement I planned, but it's my life now, and I'm learning to accept it. Some days are harder than others. Some days I wake up angry, thinking about all the money I lost, all the time I wasted, all the lies I believed. Other days, I wake up grateful. Grateful I found out when I did. Grateful I didn't give her everything. Grateful I'm still here, still alive, still moving forward. The hardest part isn't the money, though, that stings. The hardest part is learning to trust again. Learning to believe that not everyone has an ulterior motive, that not every smile hides a scheme. I've become cautious to the point of paranoia, and I know that's not healthy. I'm working on it slowly, but it's hard. And it's hard to open yourself up again after someone has used your openness against you. If there's one lesson I can share, it's this. Protect yourself. Protect your heart, your money, your future. Don't give everything to someone just because they ask, or because you love them, or because they tell you a sad story. Help if you can, but verify. Ask for proof. Don't be afraid to say no. And most importantly, don't ignore your instincts. If something feels wrong, investigate. Don't brush it off. Don't tell yourself you're overreacting, because sometimes you're not. Sometimes you're exactly right. I still think about Marries sometimes. Wonder where she is, what she's doing, if she ever thinks about me. Probably not. I was just a transaction to her, a means to an end. But I think about her, and I think about Carlo, and I wonder if they're still together, if they're happy, if the money I gave them was worth it. So I hope it wasn't. I hope that money brought them nothing but trouble. But I don't know, and I'll probably never know, and maybe that's for the best. Closure is overrated anyway. These days, I try to focus on the good things. The sun sets over Dumaguete Bay, the friendly faces of my students when we have a good lesson, the cold bottle of San Miguel after a long day, the fact that I'm still here, still fighting, still refusing to give up. That's worth something. That has to be worth something. If you're watching this, thank you for listening to my story. I know it's not a happy one, not a fairy tale, but it's real. It's what happened to me, and maybe it'll help someone else avoid the same mistakes. Maybe someone will watch this and think twice before sending money to someone they barely know. Maybe someone will ask for proof, verify a story, protect themselves. If that happens, if even one person learns from my mistakes, then maybe all of this meant something. Maybe it wasn't all for nothing. And if you're going through something similar, if you've been scammed or betrayed or taken advantage of, know that you're not alone. It happens. It happens to smart people, careful people, good people. It doesn't mean you're stupid or naive. It just means you trusted someone who didn't deserve it. And that's on them, not you. You'll get through this. It won't be easy and it won't be quick, but you'll survive. You're stronger than you think. I know I am. I didn't think I'd survive this, but I did. And so will you. So that's my story. That's what happened when I fell in love with someone who saw me as a wallet instead of a person. It cost me $70,000, 5 years of my life and a dream I'd worked decades to achieve. But it didn't cost me everything. I still have my life, my health, and my determination. And that's enough. It has to be enough, because that's all I have left. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves. And remember, trust but verify. Always verify.